I got into soccer later. I was 14 during the 2010 World Cup. So I wasn't a kid or I wasn't a fan from birth, and I didn't have, parents and uncles and cousins and siblings that watched the game. Like this was all kind of on me. The 2010 World Cup, it was the Landon Donovan goal. Like what else are we going to talk about as a US soccer fan? Landon Donovan, LD, and kind of just expanded that even more leading into the 2014 World Cup. I was 18, still, wasn't allowed to legally drink. So me and my friends are going to like Buffalo Wild Wings, just eat wings and watch the World Cup. Leading into the 2018 World Cup, I would say is really where I was like the first time as an educated soccer fan. 2010 was just like, this is soccer. This is fun. Like Landon Donovan, I like that guy, like that's what it was. But 2018 was more like, okay, like I know about Premier League teams, La Liga teams, like Tim Howard's has played in the Premier League. MLS Aces kind of helped me grow that. Soccer for me wasn't innate. It wasn't from the beginning, especially with the Mets, the Jets, the Knicks, the Rangers. Those are my sport teams. So if you know anything about those sports teams, then yes, you can feel bad for me. NYCFC starting, that's cool. Andrea Pirlo, David Villa, Frank Lampard, mixed discrude at the time was a big deal. That's kind of what turned me more into like, okay, MLS, like I will be the MLS guy in my friend group, and I still am the MLS guy in my closest friend group.
Kylian Mbappe could have never played football if he grew up in the US, in my opinion.
Being from the States, you have to learn how things are over there, because MLS is much different than the Premier League, and you're almost stepping into a different realm.
With the 2026 World Cup coming here and a new generation of fans start to become to discover the game, there's no telling where the game's going to be 10, 15, 20 years.
One game changed my life, and that's all it ever takes.
Episode 67 of Box to Box. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jose Tejas. I'm the primary host of the show. Right next to me on your screen, you see another creator. I will tee him up with a great intro here in just 1 second. But before we get there, if you haven't done so already, like the video down below, subscribe to the channel. If you're a massive fan of not just growing the beautiful game here on this side of the world, North America, but more importantly, if you're just a fan of independent fans turned content creators, I got a feeling you're going to love the show today, the interview we're going to get into. And let me go and tee him up. He is the host of MLS Aces, what I consider to be one of the many OGs who are keeping the soccer scene alive with their content here in North America. The guy loves Major League Soccer. He's a New Yorker, probably loves New York sports altogether. We have Tom Sweezy on Box to Box today. Tom, how are you, my man?
It's a lot of high expectations, like a lot of the sports teams that I root for. So hopefully, unlike the sports teams I root for, I actually meet those expectations and don't go, stumbling and crashing. So I'm here. I'm good. It's good to always chat with you, Jose. So I'm good.
I appreciate it, bro. Look, man, that was the most New York response I've gotten to that question. So I appreciate that, man. Right on brand with, I think, how the show's going to go today. Yeah, man. Before we jump into everything on the agenda as far as talking points go, we are in the middle, and I say the middle, right? We're not in the middle of round one, but middle of the MLS postseason. Round one's getting ready to come to an end. We got a few of these matchups that are progressing to a game three. Uncharted territory for a lot of us, not just creators, but as fans as well. I don't even know what to expect this coming weekend with some of the matches, those starting as soon as tomorrow. I don't know, man. You're putting a lot of content out there for the postseason, but at the same time, as a New York City FC fan, you're kind of, as from a fan's perspective, watching and I imagine critiquing heavily along the way. How is this postseason treating you so far?
From a content creation point of view, it's been a pain, and I try not to curse when I'm not on my show, so it's been a pain in the butt. But it's been annoying because there's always a game on a day that I need to record, and you want to talk about as many games as possible. So it's okay, we have to push recording off as much as possible. And then it's typically gone down to the last 2 weeks of there's a game on while we're recording. So it's like a watch along that's not live plus talking about other games. So it's really, it's really a pain from a content creation point of view. But as a fan, right, the reason why you get into it and the reason why I got into starting a podcast and a Twitter account and a blog and everything about talking about Major League Soccer is these games are just fun, right? MLS Cup playoffs is just a different beast when you compare it to the regular season, Open Cup, Leagues Cup now, right? So I get juiced for the MLS Cup playoffs. This format's a little tricky in my brain. I'm not sure if I like it, but we've seen some cool action. We've seen some upsets. Sporting Kansas City's been a great story. Shout out Cincinnati for knocking out the Red Bulls, and it's been a lot going on, but it's been good. It's been fun. It's the playoffs. You can't like expect anything less than what we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's another thing, right? Is like, look, I know when a lot of fans came into this, and I've asked so many fans, whether they're creators or not, I feel like I've been polling, like I'm running some national survey or a census or something. How do they feel about this new format? And we'll talk about it a little bit later in the show. But there's always so much negativity, and I kind of feel like you do, right? It's like no matter what we have to deal with in terms of the changes the league has made, it's playoffs. How upset can you be, really? Teams are going home. Others are progressing. There are upsets, massive upsets already. You alluded to Kansas City knocking out St. Louis. I don't know, man. I mean, shout out to Cincinnati for doing the job as the 1 seed and, sending the Red Bulls home. But I think it's been already a pretty interesting postseason so far. The wild cards were also a brand new thing that got introduced. And even those matches, right? Those 2 matches were kind of interesting. That's the word I'll use. But yeah, man, I think it's been pretty. I'll say it, and maybe others won't agree with me. Pretty positive so far as playoffs for the MLS Cup go in 2023. But look, let's start. I think for today with our conversation, it is about you, man. I think there's so many. Look, you're what, nearly 300 episodes into MLS Aces. You've been doing this a long time, putting your opinions on the internet for others to consume. But we haven't, at least as far as the episodes that I've checked out from the start of your catalog to where you are now, hasn't been a lot of your story at the forefront. I definitely want to be able to tell some of that today. So let's start with the question that we always, kind of kick the ball off with here on the show. Tom, who are you today?
It's funny how you introed that question, because I am a person, and this is for everyone to know, and anyone personally who knows me knows this about me, that I do not like the spotlight on myself. Oddly enough, for someone who hosts a podcast, it's my only, I guess, like outlet where I can really sit back and, I guess, lead a show, but it's mainly talking about things that I like, right? And things that I have opinions on and everything like that. So I'm a person that doesn't like the spotlight on me. I've been, on other shows before where they've asked me to talk about Major League MLS Aces. Sometimes I also call it Major League Soccer Aces, which I guess is correct, but that's a whole other ramble. I'm a person who also likes to ramble, but I'm a person who isn't maybe the best at talking about himself, highlighting his product, his show, everything like that, right? So that is something that I'm aware of, and I'm definitely working on as a content creator and as just, I think, a human being, right? I think that sometimes it is okay to be a little bit selfish. It is okay to talk about yourself and be proud of things that you do and put out there. And yes, Major League, I almost did it again, MLS Aces. It's been a thing that's been around since 2015, and not many people know that, right? 2015 was the creation of the Twitter account, because it really just came out of the idea of, I wanted to talk about MLS. I didn't have a circle of people around me who were aware of it, who talked about it, who watched it, who did any of that. So how can I do that? I'm going to go out on the internet and I'm going to talk with people, about people, follow people who talk about it. 2016, I got a little bit more confidence around myself of, I can talk about this. I have opinions. I know what it is. I went out on some free sports blog website, created an MLS Aces blog, and I started throwing out blogs for the entire 2016 season. After that, got a little bit more confident. 2017, the podcast came out. And as you alluded to, Jose, I mean, it's been a lot of episodes later. It's been a lot of years later at this point. And I know you alluded to it in the intro. I don't know if I consider myself an OG. I think, I've been around a long time, but to me, I look at inspiration that I get from others that have been doing this a little bit longer. We talked about Mark Fishkin before we started recording, and he was on last week with you, and he's someone who's been around, who's been doing it and in this market that I'm aware of, and yes, it's the Red Bulls, but he's someone who I consider an OG, someone who I look at and I respect his opinion and everything like that. So I'm just trying to do what's best for me, my show, grow as a human being, grow as a show, and also just try not to take life too seriously. There's enough stuff out there, I think, for people to get serious and upset and yell and argue about. Come watch MLS Aces, take an hour of your day to relax mentally, laugh a little bit, talk about something that you want to, that you enjoy watching, and listen to something that you enjoy watching, and move on from your day. Go back to the serious stuff after, type of deal. That's how I think of myself. That's how I think of the show and MLS Aces as a whole.
I love that, man. That's a great response. I think that not taking yourself too seriously and just enjoying what you do, right? It's why you started the show to begin with. And yeah, man, I think, Mark, we had him on last week. Fantastic OG. I think guys like Corner of the Galaxy on the West Coast are equally another like 1.0 OG that, we're doing this when, podcast, the idea of a podcast was still very, very new. But yeah, I mean, considering where, we're in this era now where I feel like it's not a saturated market yet, but you're definitely seeing a lot of independent shows popping up as the league continues to expand. And so I don't know, man, I think that there's a lot that goes along with your journey and being someone who started in 2015 versus someone who used something like COVID in 2020 or 2021 to propel them to create a show and start trying to cover MLS. I think it's I tip my hat to it as someone who could have comes a little bit later. But with that said, man,
sorry, I just want to say one point to that, and this is one thing I'm working on again, stroking the ego a little bit, and I'm gonna get comfortable with it. I'm not completely comfortable with this, but the thing that I think you see about a lot of independent content creators is the crash and burn, right? It's the excitement of a new podcast. It's 20 episodes in, and then you realize, oh, this kind of sucks. I don't want to do it this week. I don't have anything to talk about. What do I talk about? Oh, I don't have a co-host this week. What can I do? Like, that's the thing that I think people really need to realize is, like, it sounds fun to start a podcast, and it's not serious. Again, it's a microphone, it's a camera, it's a conversation. You hit record, and that's the basis of what it is. But there is a lot of extra work if you want to, have it go past basic conversation that you throw out on the internet once a week, twice a week, whatever it is. So that is something that I give myself credit for, and I give the co-hosts that I've had along the way credit for, is pushing us to make sure we get it out every week, that it's quality every week. I mean, some weeks, but that it's quality, for the most part, every single week, right? So that is something that if I am telling someone who wants to start a podcast about whatever, it's just like, you have to really dive on in if you want it to be somewhat successful. And I'm not even going to sit here and say I'm a successful podcast, but have it be somewhat successful and have people listen to it and have people follow it and have it grow the thing that you're passionate about. So sorry to cut you off. That's just the one point that I would throw out there too.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think Mark said the same thing in a similar way last week, right? Like the hardest part about creating this content, and especially in a league that's growing, that's not as big as the Premier League or any one of the European leagues that dominate the media space today, is really, it's like what we say, we talk about players, for example, the best ability is availability. And sometimes, if you're not consistent with your content, it's so easy for a growing audience to just forget that your show exists, right? Yep. So the hardest part is just making it part of, as Mark would put it, your circadian rhythm, week in and week out, just going live or hitting record and continue to deliver your opinions while understanding that you need to get better at how you present those opinions week over week. And I think that you do it for enough weeks at a time or years at a time, your content will get better. And that's what I would say about MLS Aces. For anybody who hasn't tuned in, I think if you're looking for a way to break into Major League Soccer and start understanding how the league works, how some of the movements amongst teams and players are working out, or just kind of understanding, where you as a fan fit in amongst the league, check out the show. I think that there's more than enough for you to kind of be content with, entertained by. Tom and his boy Jason do a great job. So with that said, though, I still think even talking about the show as it is today is still getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, right? I think I want to talk about, look, man, you live in a massive sports market. I want to understand how soccer fits in. This part to me is always very, very intriguing because, look, especially in major sports markets like New York or LA, you have so much that consumes your attention, so much if you're a sports fan, right? you kind of have to prioritize a little bit. But at some point, you decided that Major League Soccer was going to be a big part of your life, and not just Major League Soccer, but soccer as a sport.
Yeah.
Like how, I don't know, what's the earliest memory you have of that coming into play, and how did that lead to you, I don't know, embracing it as a fan?
It's funny because the earliest memories I have of soccer probably aren't the best light of soccer and or politically correct for things people said about the sport of soccer around me and my community and everything like that, right? But if I'm going with, like, I think once I got past, I would say, that immature stage of viewing the game of soccer and moving more into the, I guess, real soccer fandom that I created. It's the 2010 World Cup. I got into soccer later. I was 14 during the 2010 World Cup. So I wasn't a kid or I wasn't a fan from birth, and I didn't have, parents and uncles and cousins and siblings that watched the game. Like, this was all kind of on me. And I mean, look, the 2010 World Cup, it was the Landon Donovan goal. Like what else are we going to talk about as a US soccer fan from that competition, right? Landon Donovan, LD, and kind of just expanded that even more leading into the 2014 World Cup, when I was a little bit older. I was 18, still, wasn't allowed to legally drink. So me and my friends are going to, like, Buffalo Wild Wings to sit down there and just eat wings and watch the World Cup. Sitting there watching the Belgium game and being absolutely devastated after Tim Howard stood on his head. And then it was really leading into the 2018 World Cup, I would say, is really where I was, like, the first time as an educated soccer fan. 2010 was just like, this is soccer, this is fun. Like, Landon Donovan, I like that guy, like, that's what it was. But 2018 was more like, okay, like, I know about Premier League teams, La Liga teams, like, where Tim Howard's has played in the Premier League, like, he's a really good goalkeeper then, like, kind of stuff like that, right? Like, the basics of it. And then that's really where I think the education aspect of MLS Aces kind of helped me grow what does, club soccer in the US have a Major League Soccer? Does anyone talk about it? No, it's a retirement league. It sucks. Okay, well, is it? Like, let me look into it a little bit more. And then that's how MLS Aces began. So soccer for me wasn't innate. It wasn't from the beginning, especially with the Mets, the Jets, the Knicks, the Rangers. Those are my sport teams. So if you know anything about those sports teams, then yes, you can feel bad for me. But pretty much, I was like, what do we have? Oh, NYCFC starting. That's cool. Andrea Pirlo, David Villa, Frank Lampard. Mixed Discrude at the time was a big deal. So it was like, that's kind of what turned me more into, like, okay, MLS. Like, I will be the MLS guy in my friend group. And I still am the MLS guy in my closest friend group. And that was, I don't know if that answered your question, but that answered the question.
It 100% answered my question. It was kind of crazy. You mentioned, not being of legal age to drink, but at the same time going to Buffalo Wild Wings. Bro, I was of legal age to drink at the time, during that 2014 World Cup, and I was still going to Buffalo Wild Wings to watch the game. So much so that I was, I'll be honest, I don't think, my former employer or my wife would even be too happy with this, but at the end of the day, like, I was cutting out of work. I was going to the bar. I was trying to watch as many games. I didn't care. Really, to me, soccer was everything in my life. And it's really, really cool to hear that fans who were introduced to the game later in life, or on the opposite end of the spectrum that I was, because I'm a lifer. I was born into this game. I feel like my parents and my grandparents just created that environment for me. But it's really awesome to know that even though you have someone like yourself who's on the complete opposite end of that spectrum in the fan journey, we kind of ended up at the same spot, right? Still, relatively speaking, cheering on our boys at the same type of establishment. I remember, watching Jermaine Jones hit that banger against Portugal. And I'll be honest, I didn't know what to expect from, like, an American crowd at a Buffalo Wild Wings in Addison, Texas. But the entire bar stood up. It felt like a meme from, when they said when England was in the Euros or any other major tournament and they score a goal. I feel like there's always these videos that run rampant on Twitter of the entire crowd just throwing their beers into the air and freaking out. It kind of felt like that. I feel like the World Cup universally just unites this country in a way that many other things don't. So yeah, man, it definitely resonates with me, and it's just kind of cool to see that our stories in terms of where we ended up and what has propelled us to where we are today are still pretty close together and spot on. So with these, these trips that you were going to, to B-dubs, you're watching the game, was Jason part of this friend group already or no?
No, so Jason wasn't. Jason didn't come into my life and the MLS Aces picture until later on, right? So 2017 is when the podcast began, and my original co-host was someone who I think you're familiar with, Jose Riley James, who, if you guys don't know, from his content around US soccer, or if anyone cares, that's his podcast. That's not me just saying if anyone cares. That's his podcast now. So if anyone's familiar with him, he was the original co-host of the show. And it's funny because like I started it and I was 20 when I started MLS Aces. And like Riley was like 16, and I was like, this kid, like whatever. And now it's like I always joke around with Riley and call him a kid still, even though he's well into his 20s, and I'm still under 30, but whatever. So it's like that was the original start to it, and Riley was around, I want to say, for 90 something episodes of it. Like he got the entire 2017 season in, and I want to say halfway through 2018 as well. And then Jason kind of came in towards the end of 2018, before or during the 2018 MLS Cup playoffs, if I remember off the top of my head. Riley left, he wanted to move forward into a different, point, and credit and kudos to him with what he's doing. And then, I was just kind of looking around for a co-host. I didn't really have anyone. I didn't have an idea. Jason was someone who was like, as soon as you put out on Twitter that there's a new episode out or whatever, he's the first one liking it, reposting it, commenting on it, whatever. And I was like, why not give him a shot as a guest and see how he does? I've had DM conversations with him before. He's the one that actually created the MLS Aces logo of what it is today before he was even a co-host. So I had awesome conversational relationship with Jason. And then things just clicked, things work, after a while. I think Jason got used to having his opinion be out there, his voice be out there, eventually his face be out there. And then, I think things clicked for him podcast wise, and we're here today. We also have a second co-host in Sam Nelson. Sam's been away from the podcast for a few weeks now. He's got some things going on. We're hoping to see him back and have him come back soon. He was having his own lower division US soccer podcast go on as well. He was covering everything at the time from like USL to the NASL, I still think, when he was doing the podcast. So he's a good dude. He's someone who, him and Jason, I definitely consider close friends now. And, there's been a lot of very close friends of the podcast bouncing around as well. So it's been a long journey to get to where we are today with me and Jason and Sam, for sure.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, even Jason, right? Still around since 2018. Riley putting in, almost 2 seasons completely with MLS Aces. And so, yeah, it's I'll say this. I think you have some pretty damn good luck with hosts. I think that there's more than a few other shows out there who may even cycle through 1 or 2 during just one full season. And so, for that to kind of take place, and I am Riley. It's kind of crazy how young he is. I will say that I love Riley. I actually had a conversation with him earlier today. But it's he loves what we're doing with USL, and I think we're going to find interesting ways of getting him involved on that front. But it's just really interesting to hear that he's touched so many parts of this Major League Soccer content spectrum that most of us probably didn't even realize, and now he gets that unique chance to kind of just talk to interesting people and personalities through IAC, right? If anyone cares. And so really, really cool show. Go check that out if you guys haven't already. But going back to your story, Tom, I think Jason now being part of the show since 2018, is he also an NYCFC fan? Who does he support?
He is a Chicago Fire fan, so we both.
Man, you guys are both down bad.
We're both not doing well. Not doing well.
Well, that's a great question. I think I would love Jason's opinion. Maybe he can leave it down in the comments below. But you guys being he's a 1.0 OG in terms of at least the team itself. NYCFC expansion came around in 2014, 2015, I believe. That season specifically, it came out with a bang. You mentioned David Villa before, Frank Lampard, Andrea Pirlo, some of the biggest DP names this league has really ever seen. And David Villa had a stint at New York City that got him called up to the Spanish national team 3 years removed from it. Like,
Yes.
let that sink in, right? That's crazy. But going from that to where the team is today, I'm just curious from a fan's perspective, man. Like, what was this season like for you? And how, I don't know, did it end in the way that you thought, watching Red Bulls qualify for, the wild card round on decision day? Like, I don't know, as an NYCFC fan, how does that hit you?
I came into the season with probably the worst feeling about the club since the inaugural season. Because look, I mean, it's not even from like, we suck, blah, blah, blah. Like NYCFC Twitter and social media sometimes is an absolute like drag, and it drains me. But you have to just be realistic. We rotated through how many starters that got us through 5-6 seasons of being contenders, right? Like we rotated through Anton Tinnerholm, Sean Johnson at the time, Maxi Morales. We rotated through Tati Castellanos, A Bear, like all these guys who were just integral pieces to us being a top of the East team year after year after year, winning the 2021 MLS Cup, making the 2022 Eastern Conference Finals, winning the 2022 Campeones Cup, right? Like we rotated through so many guys and didn't replace them. Like that's just what happened. So I wasn't going into 2023 with high hopes. Then obviously you come out, season's looking good, we're winning games, but then the holes start showing up of the veteran leadership we lost. Just players not having the quality that we had once before. We didn't have a straight up number 9. Talis Magno is not a number 9, and I will turn this into an argument. I'll turn this entire podcast into a Talis Magno is not a 9 argument. But we didn't have a 9 until Bakrar showed up during the summer. I had a little bit of hope with the Leagues Cup. We made it out of the group. We lose to Red Bulls 1-0. I had hope with US Open Cup. We lose to Cincy 1-0. We just didn't have enough offensively or defense. We didn't have enough at all, period. So the season went as far as I thought it was going to go. Now, do I view 2023 NYCFC as a retooling and kind of getting readjusted for us trying to push back to the top? Yes, I think 2024, 2025, 2026, we will be a good team if things that we've seen from David Lee and City Football Group in the past kind of comes to light again. And then to your final question about the Red Bulls in the play-in game, Red Bulls are Red Bulls, right? Like they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to be a competitive team, but the all-out energy drink soccer is going to wear them away by the time the playoffs comes around. I expected them to beat Charlotte in the play-in game. I didn't root for it. That was my expert opinion, right? And then look, they weren't getting past Cincy. I know we went to PKs in the second game, but they weren't getting past Cincinnati. So that's fine. It is what it is. That's how I view the Red Bulls right now.
And what about decision day? Now knowing that Jason's a Chicago Fire fan, I mean, how did you guys? I don't know. What was the banter like decision day?
It was a lot of shit talking that I will keep in private text message for sure. But look, honestly, the thing about it is by the time decision day came around, we were both so like beaten down from the final stretch of the season that NYCFC still needed help if they won. Jason had a little bit more hope than me because if Chicago won, they only really needed like one other result to go their way, and I don't even think it did, if I remember off the top of my head correctly. So
they were in control too, which was kind of crazy. Like even going into the last 2 or 3 games, I mean, Jason had to feel like he got pooped on out of nowhere, right? Like I don't know what happened.
Look, this is specifically for Jason, this moment right here. The Chicago dumpster fire continued to burn, and that's how it goes for Chicago fans. That's it.
Yeah, man. Take them back to 2016 or 2017. I don't know. A lot of my family lives in Chicago, and just to hear them every now and then, to hear the optimism from the start of a new season slowly wither away as the season continues on, it's impressive more than anything else.
When you're biggest like thing that you can hold on to going into a season is an 18-year-old goalkeeper and Brian Gutierrez, who's a fantastic player. Don't get me wrong, Chris Brady and Brian Gutierrez, fantastic players. But when that's what you're holding on to save your season, you have some issues as a club. That's all I'll say about the Chicago Fire.
They might get Lewandowski. There might be a new goal scorer in that part of the country, which kind of makes sense. I mean, as a Barca fan myself, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think he's 35 years old. I'd be okay with him moving on. My issue with it from a Major League Soccer fan standpoint is, if we're trying to move away from the retirement league stuff, are we really going to entertain this fully? I mean, the Fire are already paying Shaqiri an arm and a leg. I don't know. It's just it's a really interesting conversation to have. I'm sure Jason has a ton of opinions on it.
Jason would love Lewandowski, first of all. If he ever said he didn't, that's an absolute lie. There's a difference between, I think, getting Lewandowski from Barcelona and getting Luis Suarez from Gremio. And that's, relevant because Suarez is potentially apparently coming to Inter Miami, right? So it's like, I don't love Suarez joining Messi and friends down in Miami. That seems very much like, to me, non-sustainable for success. That it's maybe a hot take on Miami, but I just don't think the likes of Busquets, Alba, Messi, and a Luis Suarez all pushing their mid-30s or higher is going to be successful in a Major League Soccer season where they already play probably too many compact games. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I understand and I want to avoid the retirement league mantra as much as possible. But at the same exact time, we're producing talent at such a high rate too that's being shipped off to Europe that, I think that one Lewandowski signing or one Suarez signing could also be overlooked.
Yeah. I mean, look, this was a wild year for MLS. There's no way to put it lightly, right? I mean, the arrival of Messi and friends, Messi FC, as I like to call it, it's created a media shitstorm in a great way. At the same time, it's also created a lot of visibility for the league. I think as someone who's been following the league now as long as you have, right, nearly a decade, in some form or fashion, whether it's pre MLS Aces or not.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to understand from your. I'm sure you've given this some thought. With where everything's going, I just see, and if Luis Suarez does come, Lewandowski does come, then I think we have some very, very big player personalities now entering this league. I would even argue bigger than some of the ones we've seen in the past that we've talked about on the show today. I see change coming. I think it has to. I think there's no way that we continue to draw in players and personalities this big and make this worthwhile for partners like Apple TV without changing some of the structure that has gotten MLS to where it is today. I mean, do you see, well, let me ask you this. Do you think the Messi move and Busquets coming, Jordi, all these other players, Messi and friends, did it kind of expose the league a little bit? Like, from your perspective, do you think that it's created some very visible holes that we now need to fill?
I don't know if expose is the right word to put around that, but I get the question in the sense of it's now, I think, put the pressure on Don Garber and the leaders of Major League Soccer to change. When David Beckham came, they obviously had to create designated players and all that stuff in order to change so that the league could sustain David Beckham, more players wanting to come like a David Beckham-esque, right? And change that so the league grew and went into a new era. The David Beckham saga is the only comparison that you can throw into this Lionel Messi argument in my brain. Like, that's it. Like, there's no other signing, there's no other move, there's no other rule change that I think you can compare the two with. So in saying that, the league has to change. The league has to do something in order to allow these clubs to be more competitive year round, especially if they're going to throw in competitions like the League's Cup, which is now a month-long break in the middle of the season, which is now especially an expanded CONCACAF Cup starting next year, which is now expanding all these tournaments and all these competitions. These guys are playing more games than that they've ever had to before. And yes, I know people make the argument teams in Europe do it, blah blah blah. North American teams have never had to do this before. So there has to be a little bit of a change, especially for these guys who have played a majority of their career in North America. So I think the league has to change, whether that's adding a fourth DP, making rule changes to the U22 initiative, make a spending floor that I personally love that rule, spending floor. I don't think that's likely, but I think I personally would like to see that because you see clubs like Colorado that don't spend money or don't seem to care, making the salary cap higher. Whatever it is, the league needs to do something in order to allow these clubs to be able to spend more and be more competitive across multiple competitions that you're asking them to play.
Yeah, I agree. The spending floor is actually interesting. I've never heard that idea, but I like the idea, right? I mean, the Cronkies haven't really truly invested.
Mhm.
Yes, they're the lead investors for the Colorado Rapids as a club,
Yeah.
but what have they added since becoming the majority shareholders of that club in terms of actual value over the last half decade to a decade, right? I mean, I think
When
you'll go ahead.
when you're relying on loaned in DPs to get them on a discount because you're too scared, I don't know if that's the right word, but you're too scared to make the investment and go big on a scouting department and analytics department to then go and find that sure thing, Hani Mukhtar, that sure thing, Dennis Bouanga, Carlos Vela, whatever it is, right? Like Carlos Vela is a bad example because Hani and Dennis were probably lesser known commodities, but whatever.
Yeah,
When you aren't when you aren't doing that for the club that you are the majority owner of, you put your club at a disadvantage to the rest of the league. Now it's the point of whether you care enough for that. Obviously, Kroenke owns a lot of other sports teams that he likes to show around a little bit more than the Colorado Rapids, and I don't want to just have this be an entire you know what fest on the Colorado Rapids here, but it's true. They're the
yeah.
perfect example of it in Major League Soccer. So I think a spending floor would almost force clubs to be more competitive. And yes, there's going to be clubs that would still spend as little as they possibly could spread out throughout their roster, but that would also force clubs to spend more in lieu, have more players on the roster type of deal. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think that, look, it's not to say that what the Cronkies have done, previously with the Rapids hasn't worked. We all know the success
Yeah.
that club has seen throughout its history, but most of their success is tied to the earliest days of the league. And as the league continues to expand, become more competitive, it's adapt or die. And I think even if they're trying to remain as frugal as possible over there, if you want to reap the benefits of the investment that you've made, you will invest in it. That's just how sports clubs work. So if you don't want to have that attached to you, then sell it. I think that's got to be the only way to move forward as the Rapids ownership group, and equally for the league, right? I would
The
love to
league
see a
needs to
spending
force that. The league
Yeah.
needs to force their owners to play game. And if the league doesn't do that, then you're going to be stuck with five-ish clubs a year, just dwindling a season away and being a laughing stock for the rest of the league, while you see clubs and brands like LAFC and St. Louis this year, and sure, NYCFC. I mean, that's a little bit different with City Football Group, but you get it. Just getting
Yeah.
more globally known, more globally, recognizable in the world's game, while no one in Europe probably knows what the Colorado Rapids are.
Exactly. Or even like I mean, off the cuff, right? Like look at someone like now with the expansion of San Diego FC, right? And we definitely expect, especially with how much it took to win that bid, right? And hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, at the end of the day, I fully expect them to invest as much as possible to be successful. I think there's that chip on their shoulder, right? There's the loyals that were around and had garnered the community in San Diego in a pretty impressive way for a USL team, and that all goes away because of and not directly because of, but I will argue that it's because of San Diego FC and the expansion by MLS.
It's 100% that.
Yeah, anybody who says otherwise, you're just trying to be nice and not step on toes like I'm trying to do right now. But at the same time,
I'll step on toes all day, all day.
So with that, I mean, I don't know, like with that club, we need to see them, investing in their roster heavily, and more importantly, investing in the community of San Diego to get them bought into this for it to be successful, right?
For sure. You have to. MLS clubs nowadays come in with a different ability, I'll say, than MLS clubs of old. And I'm not even including the OG clubs. Like that's not even like a relevant thought. Like I'm saying, even if you're talking the Philadelphia Union, you're talking the CF Montreals, you're talking the Portland Timbers, right? Like clubs like that really came in, I would say, pre-2015, but it's not an OG club. Like they kind of came in this awkward part and have had to grow with the rest of the league and kind of do their best. clubs nowadays, they're pampered, right? It's like, back in my day, I had to walk up the hill back and forth and with snow on the ground or whatever. Like, these clubs walk in and they get U22 spots and DPs and all like Generation Adidas spots with and it's absolutely ridiculous. I think that if you are a club coming into Major League Soccer, and I'm not talking winning MLS Cup off the bat, but if you're a new club coming into this league, that you can't garner enough preparation and success to be good year one or year two. Like, we saw what St. Louis did. St. Louis built their 2 team with MLS Next Pro. That's also another advantage that these clubs have. They had so many of these guys like a Joao Klaus who stepped up this year huge in St. Louis for a whole year before the club existed at the Major League Soccer level. And they were successful from year one. They won the Western Conference regular season in year one. Yes, was it a bad showing in the playoffs? Yes, but that's a learning aspect, and I expect St. Louis to be good next year. But if you are a new team, if you're San Diego coming in next year, whenever San Diego's coming in, again, brain's not here completely, but whenever San Diego, thank you, 2025, even more of an example of next year, make DP signings, sign your head coach. If you can, I don't know if they're going to be able to, but have an MLS Next Pro team. Start building an academy, doing what you can to garner as much on and off the field as possible.
Yeah.
To set up for success year one. So it's San Diego has every opportunity to be just as successful as LAFC, as Austin, as St. Louis, and even probably more success. So
yeah,
that's my take.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think hopefully, I mean, if they do it right, I think everything you said is spot on. But they do it right. They follow the St. Louis blueprint. And I don't want my FC Dallas fandom to come into play too much here, but hopefully not the Austin blueprint. I think they're one of the highest spending teams, the top 5 highest spending teams in terms of salary, and St. Louis one of the bottom 5. I think if you had to, ask yourself what's more sustainable while still being able to see progress that leads to sustained success, it is 100% the St. Louis model. So that there's a page and potentially even a playbook that you could steal.
Yeah, yes and no. I don't love what St. Louis did. I think not that St. Louis did a lot of things very, very well. I do think, though, St. Louis got themselves a little too hyped up to be smacked in the face by the MLS Cup playoffs, thinking that they figured it out type of deal. Yeah. I think they'll be a very good team. Don't get me wrong. I think they'll be competing for top spots in the Western Conference, especially if things with Cardinal and this academy and everything that they've done continues to work out. But there's multiple ways to win in Major League Soccer. I think St. Louis just found maybe a new way we haven't seen in a bit.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I think, we look at just how expansion teams either perform or overperform. And, all of this is just giving us, really kind of the frame for how the league's going to continue to grow. And I think you and I both want that immensely, want to be considered, not necessarily one of the top leagues around the world. That's the goal. But I think even just to be in the consideration for a league that as competitive as what you see, not just in Europe, but all over the world, right? All leagues considered. So that's very much the goal for MLS. We want to see that happen. But going back to MLS Aces a little bit, I was really kind of curious, and I think I was going to ask this earlier. You might have alluded to it a little bit, but I think that the why for MLS Aces to me is massively important, right? I think when I see, like, for example, right, when I even thought about this show, Box to Box, I just thought that so many creators are branded for their content. That's the value that they bring to any person who's tuning in. And all they really care about is further developing their own opinions by using shows like yours, who've been around for quite some time, that are credible, so that they can equally be as credible when they're discussing with their friends, their peer groups, whatever it may be. That's how I've always seen a lot of this young and kind of growing fan base, and the content that stems from it. But I think with MLS Aces, it's really interesting, right? You've been doing this for longer than most, even though there is this, upper echelon of OGs that have been doing it for longer than you guys have.
Yeah.
But I don't know, when you started it, and I think you said before, right? This was something that, you just kind of wanted to have a group or a space where you could talk about the league, keep it casual, and get better at what you do. But did you actually see, I don't know, did you see a gap in the market? Were you searching for some content, maybe not able to find it, and decided, hey, this is a perfect show. This is my opportunity to address that gap?
In the beginning, no. In all honesty, no, it wasn't. In the beginning, it seriously was. I love talking sports. Like growing up, like I could read you off the stats for the last 5 years of the Mets backup second baseman, and no one knew this dude's name. I could tell you the hometown. He grew up in Venezuela. Like I got it all, right? Like that, like
Yeah.
that's the type of sports fandom I grew up into. So literally not having an avenue to talk about this new league, new team, new whatever that I am into, that I enjoy watching, that I think is fun, that I think is kind of soccer, but a little bit on crack. Like it's kind of awesome. Right. Like I think like that's kind of what urged me to start it in 2017 was like, I have no one to talk about this with. Like
Yeah.
Like I need to get my opinion out there. I need to hear what someone else's opinion with. Do I think it's stupid? Do I think it's awesome? Whatever it is, right? Like that was the start. And then I think after it started and I was meeting people, I was connecting with people, shooting DMs across text messages, and sorry to all of the players, front office staff, and people that I DM'd back in 2017 as a dumb 20-year-old and probably had no social media etiquette. I think I realized after a while that I was just like, oh, like there's no like casual show that like just talks soccer, but like you can also like see a connection between the two co-hosts and like see them kind of just BS a little bit, and you
Yeah.
care maybe just as much about the content creators just as much as you do about them talking about Houston versus RSL on a Thursday night. So it's to a point where I want to sit on a podcast and I want to be able to share my opinion about whatever thing in MLS or US soccer is going on with Jason or Sam. And I can also sit there and as their friend and as the classic, if you're a New Yorker, you know it, right? Like I'm also going to talk a little trash to you. I'm also going to call them the Chicago dumpster fire and potentially lose 1-0 on decision day. I mean, we took the dub, but still it is what it is. So there was I think the thing that we saw from like an extra time, which obviously I know is tied to the league, but they've been around for a while. They were obviously league based, or league associated with. They were a little buttoned up at the time. I think they've opened up way more. Like the extra time guys and girls, and their lives a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think at the time they were a little buttoned up. Total Soccer Show. I mean, there to me that's the goal. That's the peak. Like I love TSS and everything that they've done over the years and the things they've done for US soccer and content and creation for US soccer. But right, like if I'm talking like non club specific shows, like those two I really looked at and I was like, they get a little too down and dirty sometimes. Like let's have some fun, let's talk some smack. Let's also just sit back and be able to just chill as guys. And like at the time it was the focus of a 20-year-old guy, which is just like guys talking sports, right? Like at times you have to grow past that, and we have grown past that, I like to think. But it was like, okay, like let's just like have casual conversation about sports. Is that a dumb opinion? Yeah, maybe. I'm going to throw it out there, but I want you to tell me it's dumb. So that's where I think MLS Aces really started from, after I was like, okay, this is a functioning spot where I can talk. Now, where can we fill that kind of hole in the market, like you were saying?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the one thing I pulled out of everything you just said there too was that maybe the gap really was more raw authenticity, right? Which I think that, look, man, as not just sports media, but media as a whole, right? As the internet has scaled and gotten bigger, we've
Yeah.
reached a point, I think, where fans crave more than just
Mhm.
the typical, not even just podcast, the typical pregame show, the typical halftime show, the
Yeah.
postgame content that you watch, the interviews. We've gotten so accustomed to that it's really kind of become just, there's a standard for it almost amongst legacy media, right? The Sky
Mhm.
Sports, the Foxes, the ESPNs, and it all makes sense. But I think
It does.
we've also scaled to a point though where I think fans crave more. They want to hear truly authentic opinions that aren't scared to not even just toe the line, but go past it even, and bring a level of passion to the show that legacy media just cannot, because of the standards of professionalism that exist
Mhm.
amongst that space. So I don't know. I feel like did you maybe you didn't see it at first, right? But as you continue to kind of roll out episode over episode, now you're hundreds of episodes in. Do you feel like there's a level of fandom and authenticity you bring to your show that maybe legacy media just can't replicate?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, there's times where I do try to be as professional as I can with things because there's serious topics, or there's just sometimes like you don't need to make everything a joke, right? Like not everything
Yeah.
needs to be like, let's talk it out, like joke back and forth. Like not everything needs to be that. But there are also times where it's like we can laugh that the PKs in the MLS Cup playoffs, went off the rail or whatever like type of deal it is, right? Like we
Yep.
can laugh that CONCACAF US soccer sometimes is just a damn mess. Like you can like laugh about it and it doesn't need to be like so buttoned up, and we're not going to offend anyone in CONCACAF or say anything bad about or CONCACAF or MLS or anything like that. Like I will say if I think Major League Soccer has done something wrong. Probably why the show hasn't grown past what it is, but it is what it is. Like I'm also going to sit here and say how I feel about things.
Yeah.
I think we see kind of the breaking of that a little bit more now, like you're saying, right? Like I think CBS does a great job with it with the
Yep.
Golasso show that they've done. I even think, right, like Clint Dempsey talking about, covering Champions League yesterday, talking about how he got a vasectomy on like national TV. Like that's just like raw funny. Like you get to know Clint, you get to like see his sense of humor and everything like that. Like there's also just that aspect to it too. So that's what I enjoy as a fan of content, and that is also what I will try to do in reverse if someone wants to tune into my show and listen or watch or whatever.
Yeah, man. I think it's huge. I think, in all honesty, I got a bold take about this. I don't know. I think shows like yours, shows like Mark's with the Seeing Red podcast for the Red Bull
Yeah.
fans, I think all of these shows, right? Corner of the Galaxy, we talked about several today. I think they'll all, at some point, just carry more leverage. I think as the internet continues to scale, there's not going to be anything that's considered mainstream, right? Like it's every community, whether it's Major League Soccer or any other, or even individual clubs, New York City FC for you, FC Dallas for me. I think that we're all going to need our own little home, our own little place to call home, place where we feel safe to talk about the players' performances in any way that we see fit, managerial performances in any way that we see fit, expectations, et cetera, et cetera. I think we'll need those places. And the only ones, in my opinion, that can truly deliver that type of content are fans. I think it's sometimes you watch. I try not to watch it anymore because, and I don't want to drag legacy media too hard, but like when I
Yeah.
watch ESPN FC, for example, right,
Yeah.
and I hear like Stevie, like I'm a big Arsenal fan. To hear Stevie Nickel talk about how like Bukayo Saka, tends to, there's a clip I think out there of like that I shared of like him saying that Bukayo Saka tends to miss games when he picks up knocks like this. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, he's gone over almost 90 matches in a row without missing a single game, right? Like
Yeah.
a real fan would know this. And so
Mhm.
it's just one of those things where, again, it is very, very difficult to be a person who's that knowledgeable about every player and team across an entire league or across multiple leagues.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is going to lead to, again, fans like yourself and other shows out there, other creators, fans turned creators, becoming more prominent and having more of a place to build an audience and for that audience to call home, because it's just going to be necessary. I think that at some point it's just going to be what we're all accustomed to. And with that said, man, I mean, GOLZ TV, it's a massive reason why I wanted to kind of start that platform to begin with. I think it's going to be necessary, a place for all fan-made content. If you're a fan of an MLS club, if you're a fan of American soccer as a whole, there's going to be creators and segments and shows for you to tune into and be a fan of. I mean, you were one of the first guys I reached out to when we kind of started this thing. And, I wanted to see if we can get some content on board and, see if we can, cross-pollinate audiences a little bit. When I first reached out to you, I'm just really just kind of curious. I'd love for the audience to get your perspective on this. I rarely ask creators because most of the time we haven't had somebody so early involved with this platform. But you're one of the first guys we had on board. I don't know, when I first talked to you and we met about GOLZ TV, I don't know what stood out to you as this platform being something you wanted to be a part of.
You know what it is? Well, first of all, it was a conversation with you, Jose, like getting me on the phone and talking to me. Like there's been people who I think have tried to do this big US soccer media like thing, right? Like I don't even know the right word to call it, but this larger thing where it's not even what GOLZ TV is, but just, you know, a spot where everyone can find something, or like, and then it just, the effort dies off. The thing that honestly, at first I took the phone call with you, and, you know, it was like Jose selling me, like, this guy is good at talking. Like, I like it. Like, it sounds good. Like, I don't know what to expect past this first call, but like, everything sounds good. Like, why wouldn't I want to be a part of that? But I think the thing that separated what you were doing and what you were talking with me about was and this is going to go back to creating a podcast, or having a weekly show or whatever, is the effort you put in, is the, you were keeping up with me via email, via direct message, via phone calls, whatever it was. You were showing that this mattered to you, that this was important to you, that you had passion for this, and that you had passion for the content that I was creating and others that you reached out to were creating. And that's something that I think separates what GOLZ TV is doing from other, I guess, larger media spaces, right? Or even just going on a YouTube and searching for your favorite channel there, right? I think what you do, you care about the show and the people that you're reaching out to. You care about seeing red and talking with Mark and really getting deep into what he wants and what he's about, and listening to the show. That's also a huge thing that people don't do is, oh, I want to promote MLS Aces podcast. How about you listen to 2 episodes before you come talk to me? Before I say my name is Tom Sweezy on every single episode of the MLS Aces podcast, and you introduce me on your podcast as Tom Sweeney. Like, there's just different there's different ways of going about things, of course, but I think that you have to put effort into it. You have to show that you care about the people you're talking to and their shows, because MLS Aces is my baby. If you come call me or talk to me and you're disrespecting my show, I'm not going to want to work with you. And I never got that sense from you, and I never get that sense from GOLZ TV. And look, seeing where it is today and seeing everything that you've put hard work wise into it, it's an awesome platform, and I'm happy to be a part of it. And I'm happy MLS Aces is a part of it as well.
I appreciate that, man. Man, you got me ready to run through a wall. I'm not going to lie. I think, look, man, I feel like if there's one thing I could do right, it is effort and it is passion. I think people most of the time hear it coming from my voice, and sometimes negatively. I'll be honest, man. If we ever get into a footy debate, you know, it goes the other way too. But I think, you know, it's just passion. I don't ever mean it to be personal if it's negative, and if it's positive, I don't ever mean to be over the top, right? It's just anything that I do, I feel like is worth overdoing. And yeah, man, that truly does mean a lot. And I hope that other creators feel the same way. And look, man, I think this is going to be, if we do it right, this will be never ending. If we do it right, you know, it'll inspire other creators to get involved with the soccer scene here in North America. I think we really have to come together and build this thing up. And you know, the best part about all of this, these next few years, some of the best years to be involved as a soccer fan by far, not just with Major League Soccer. If you're a USMNT fan, if you want to see us perform well at major competitions, these next couple of years between now and 2026 are huge. And so,
Copa America, baby,
dude, I'm pumped. Yeah, I'm pumped. I can't wait, man. Copa America is going to be. I still don't even know what we're going to do here at GOLZ TV. I'm personally going to be traveling to do a lot of content myself if I can, and then the World Cup, I'm going to drop like. I don't want to be that person to be like, oh, I'm going to drop this much cash. I know for a fact I'm going to go watch games in Canada, obviously here in the U.S. and in Mexico, and there's going to be a pretty penny that's paid alongside that. So I don't know, man.
In the New York area, I plan on watching live games in Philly, New York, and then I will take the drive, the train, whatever it is, up to Boston. I think that's the 3 closest to me.
It's gonna be sweet.
It's gonna be, look, it's nice to have options over here. And just one last thing that I want to say about the whole content creation thing, and I feel like it's a perfect fit for this show. And this screw MLS Aces in this conversation. Like, don't even care about it right now. If you are a fan of a podcast and on social media, they have 2 followers. They have 0 followers, right? But you love this show. You tune in weekly. You tune in once a month, and you binge listen, or watch all the episodes or whatever. Make sure, like just reach out to that content creator. Give them a like. Give them a comment. Just say great episode. Like, when I see someone like comment great episode, or I even see someone comment that they disagree with the point I say, or Jason says or whatever, to me, that means you cared enough to listen and you cared enough to put something in the chat. Even if you completely disagree with what I had to say, that means you cared enough to think about what I had to say and you're putting that in the chat. So support a show, whether it's big or small, because I think the real content creators out there, and that goes for so many shows and so many social media accounts and people that I know, sometimes there is a feeling of being underappreciated. And I think, especially with Major League Soccer in 2023 with the Apple TV deal, things got a little bit trickier for independent content creators. So I think appreciate the shows that you watch, you listen to, because you never know if that one comment, that one listen, that one whatever, maybe motivates that person to do a little bit more too. So just tossing that out there.
No, that is the PSA of the show today, 100%. I think, look, man, it's so easy to get lost in the sauce of what you do. And more importantly, you mentioned staying power, right? Like the hardest thing when you're like a year into a show is to keep hitting record or to keep going live week after week, right? And hoping that the audience just continues to grow or that somebody engages, that snowballs into something else.
Yep.
Even just, and I think what I appreciate the most, and I've gotten, believe it or not, I feel like I've been spoiled and gotten upset by it a couple times. You know, I have like 5 or 6 people call me like a nostalgia merchant or like, you know, variations of that. And I'm like, you know what? I should appreciate it a little bit more the way that you've kind of mentioned on this show. It's like, well, at least they had the time, they gave their time, which they didn't have to give, to listen to the opinion. And then, call me out on it. That's totally okay.
100%.
I think that's, I think like almost flipping the mindset a little bit from a creator standpoint too goes a long way. So if you do appreciate not just what we're doing here at Box to Box, but obviously with MLS Aces and what Tom's building over there, man, a tiny bit of engagement goes longer than you probably realize.
100%.
With that said, though, man, we are kind of nearing the end of the show today. Before I let you go, though, we got 3 massive game 3s coming.
Yes.
And I say massive, obviously, from my perspective, right? Dallas is in this one with Seattle. We're going to have to pull something out of our ass for that win. I think we've only won there one time in our history against them. And that includes playoffs. And so
history does not bode well for you guys. I'll say that.
Well, look, that game's tomorrow, Friday. I think by the time this episode comes out, the audience will know kind of how that has concluded. But look, man, 3 major matchups. If you don't mind, you cover this league in an in-depth way. I'd love to get your take on how those game 3s are going to pan out from your perspective. Seattle, Dallas. What I don't know. Maybe we don't have a shot in hell. Maybe we do after the 3-1, game 2 win. I don't know. Is there a score prediction? And if Dallas had a chance at this, what would have to happen?
Seattle wins this game, in my opinion. Sorry, okay. I'm coming on your show. I'm disrespecting you right off the bat, but I think Seattle takes this game. 1, because it's at home. Major League Soccer in general is such a league that favors the home team. Like, you see it, right? Orlando won 9 road games this season. I think they led the league in road wins, and like 9 wins, I guess it's impressive. I don't know. Like, I just feel like when you watch soccer in other leagues, it's like home road doesn't really matter unless it's like, Inter Milan, Liverpool, Barca, something like that, right? But whatever. So going back to this, I think Seattle takes it at home. I personally, this might be a hot take. I think Dallas is better without Velasco. I think Velasco's kind of overrated. But I think he's just a young player, and I think he disappears at times. So that's why I think he's overrated. But I think Dallas gives some competition. Jason, my co-host, said it perfectly last week on the MLS Aces podcast that Dallas kind of needs to disrupt things for Seattle. And though I agreed with him, I didn't think Seattle would kind of fall for it, to be honest. Like, Seattle, Schmetzer, they know who they are type of deal. Seattle fell for it. I think Dallas got disruptive in the home game.
Yeah,
I think Dallas needs to do their best to do that again, and hopefully have a Jesus, hopefully have a Kamungo, an Areola, someone just kind of get that much needed goal in. I think Dallas can do it. I'm leaning way more towards my original pick of Seattle.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, at least when it comes to some of the gripes of Dallas, I think if Dallas does win, it'll be a PK shootout. I think it'll be similar to the game at Lumen Field earlier this season where we tied 1-1 with them.
Yep.
And that's going to be the blueprint, right? Ride this out to a point where it comes down to chance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the PK shots are perfect for that. And hopefully we execute those better than the Red Bulls did against Cincinnati. But the point about Velasco, I'm so glad you brought up, because I got flamed for a similar type of take where I said, thankfully, so I got a million texts when he tore his ACL and it came back after game one. And we were kind of down after that result. And everyone was asking me how I felt. And I thought it was a situation where I'm not okay with it. Obviously, he can be a game changer if the scenario presents itself. But more importantly, we just haven't had to rely upon Velasco's output all season. We really haven't. He's kind of had a down year.
The team functions better without the star, if that makes sense. I think Velasco is the best player on FC Dallas talent-wise. Personally, don't love him shifted into the middle behind Jesus. I think he's a better winger. I think we saw it in the playoffs last year, how much he can impact the game on the wing.
Yeah.
I just think that when you're forcing Velasco to play out of position or play into a position that doesn't naturally come to him, let's just say, you take away everything that he does phenomenally. And we saw that for a majority of this season. And I think the team operates better as a team without him in that sense. Yeah. It's not that he's not talented. It's not that I don't think he could be an Argentina national team player. It's not that I think FC Dallas won't sell him for a crap ton of money in a few years. All of that will probably happen. But I just think current day in 2023, they're a little bit better without him.
Yeah, I don't hate that opinion. I actually don't think it's that much of a hot take if you've tuned in to Dallas matches specifically where they've had to go up against current playoff teams throughout the season. I think those teams that didn't qualify for playoffs where we had those games, he shines as a solo star who's out there doing everything. But against fundamentally sound teams, it's really had to have been a team effort. All right, Houston RSL. This one to me was almost the tie of the round. It definitely was. Atlanta Columbus is definitely pretty damn good too. But on the West side, definitely the tie of the round in my opinion.
I'm coming on your show. I'm picking against Dallas, and I'm picking Houston. This is really where I'm going down. Look, Houston under Ben Olsen. No one predicted this, and if you did, you're a liar, because no one was a fan of the Ben Olsen hire down in Houston. Like it's true. I did not speak to anyone, and I know people who have thousands of followers on Twitter, and I know people who have 3 followers on Twitter who I respect their opinions the same, and no one liked Ben Olsen. No one understood it. Whatever. Ben Olsen has done something magical down in Houston this season. They won the Open Cup. They got their spot in CONCACAF Cup next year. He's unlocked Hector Herrera, who is a star player, and we've seen it with the amount of assists that he put up in Major League Soccer this year. Coco Carrasquilla might be the best player in CONCACAF. Might be. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, Jimenez is balling out in Europe, so maybe second best player in CONCACAF. Like, Carrasquilla is a star. I think Houston is the definition of kind of what we were talking about with Dallas, of team-wise, they're very good. They know who they are, and they play their game, and they will go up against Inter Miami. They will go up against RSL, and I think that they believe in themselves to play their style and win any game that they're a part of. Now, RSL, we saw it last game. The X-Dog is real. Jefferson Savarino with a banger of a free kick. I just think right now, with the injuries kind of built up to this RSL side, Chicho Arango, he needs to be the goal scorer. He's healthy, right? He's back, but he's not fully healthy. You're not going to see the same Arango we've seen in seasons past when he was playing at LAFC. And Diego Luna's a stud, but I don't think he can do it by himself. So I'm picking at home Houston to take the series.
Yeah, I actually agree with you wholeheartedly. And it pains me, right, as an FC Dallas fan, but I think it's kind of crazy to see the transformation. There was a time when Houston could only score by a penalty kick to start the season, and now it's like they can score from almost any angle, any player up front. It's like, if you try to slow down Herrera, you have to account for Carrasquilla, you have to account for Bassi. If you slow those guys down, Quinones is down the flank, Baird's up top. I mean, it's like there's so many options they can kind of mow you down with. It just becomes overwhelming. And I don't know how any team in the West is really going to reasonably and this is where RSL got some bad luck in comparison to other teams that Houston could see in the next round, is that it's a 3-game playoff. And to shut down a team that good offensively across 2 to maybe 3 matches, so difficult. So it's
I
tough.
said it last week on the podcast, and I still think LAFC is my favorite out of the Western Conference, but I think Houston has to be that number 2 team. Sorry, Sounders fans, but Houston is a different team in 2023. I think if they make it out of the Western Conference, I will be far from surprised.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then, dude, I mean, after the 4-1 banger, Atlanta Columbus, in a year where I feel like I've had more positive things to say about Atlanta United than a lot of their own fans, and a couple of them that we even had on some content that we've done here internally with GOLZ TV. So I don't know, man. I mean, the Crew probably are the more complete team, 100%. But you can't deny the game changers they have in Almada and Giacomakis. So I don't know. I mean, does Atlanta have a shot going to Columbus?
Atlanta 100% has a shot. This is the most difficult game to pick for me. Columbus is the most well-rounded team that I'm going to say is left in this entire playoff pool. I think Cincinnati with the season-ending injury to Nick Hagland and whatever happens to Matt Miazga, if that's true, and whatever happens with his case, and his he's at least suspended for the next game at the minimum with the card accumulation, right? So I think right now Columbus would be my favorite in the Eastern Conference. It's just when you go up against Thiago Almada, who is easily, I think, a top 3 player in Major League Soccer, pure talent-wise, and then Giacomakis, who had a goal and 2 assists in their 4-1, 4-2 win that they had over Columbus. You know, they're just 2 of the best players in the league, and they can win you games on their own. Now you're on the road. You didn't have Almada leg 1. Almada completely changes how Columbus is going to defensively play their game. You have to account for him. He is going to take up space in that midfield. He is going to draw an Aiden Morris or a Darlington Nagbe towards him and opening up a gap somewhere else. So that's the difficulty that just Almada alone brings. And then, connect Giacomakis with them. And now Atlanta is good. I'm going to just stick with my original pick going into the playoffs of Columbus, but Atlanta can, if there is going to be a team that is going to go on the road and upset out of these 3 games, I think it has to be Atlanta as the top pick.
Yeah, I think so. It's the one I'm most worried about. I am 7 for 7 so far on playoff just picks in the bracket, and this is one where I have Columbus going through out of logic based on this season. And it was like scenarios where I thought if Atlanta lost game 1 without Almada, even with him, it was going to be too difficult to claw their way back in. But 4 goals in a game, one of which he scored, I think he assisted another. It's too much of a wild card, and I don't know what to expect. I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta United comes out swinging and even takes down Columbus in an away game penalty shootout or something along those lines. I think I could see like a 2-2 going into penalties. I don't know. I guess we'll find out, man. It's game 3 start tomorrow, Friday the 10th, and they kind of last into Sunday for the weekend. So MLS sickos out there, go check it out. I'm super excited for it. I'm going to be insanely bummed for the final 2 game 3s if Dallas does lose, but man, as long as we make it a game, something we can be proud of as a 7 seed, I'll take it. At the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of talent, or at least some talent that's high profile for us that ends up exiting the door this summer or this winter, I should say. It's possible, right? So and that just happens to be Dallas's blueprint. We don't keep any one particular talent for too long.
Best academy in the country.
Yeah, man. I gotta be excited about some of these guys while we got them. But while I've had you today, Tom Sweezy, my man, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you. Before we wrap up, I mean, I definitely want to give you a platform while I can. Is any final shout outs before we wrap up?
Shout out the people who appreciate their content creators. Shout out Jason and Sam, and shout out you, Jose. That's all I'll leave it with.
I appreciate it, Tom. Sincerely, man. And we got to get you and Jason together at some point. I think getting you guys off of the MLS Aces mics into another room where the banter can hit another level. To me, that's goals right there. So we'll do it. We'll get to that point at some point in the near future. But until then, if you stuck around until the very end of the show, we appreciate you. If you haven't done so already, like the video down below, subscribe to the channel. Let us know what you thought about some of the hot takes today. I think whether we're talking about game 3s, for round one of the MLS playoffs, or some of the changes the league needs to make as it continues to expand. There was a lot here, a lot for you guys to kind of take in and leave an opinion on. So please do so. Again, from everybody here at Box to Box and GOLZ TV, my name's Jose. That's Tom. We'll catch you guys next time.